Hi everybody, welcome to the Planet Kambo Frogcast. We're here to share and to talk about some topics that might interest you. And today we're going to talk about surrendering and the path to least resistance. And that's something that I think we can all relate to. I think we all resist a lot in our lives, and maybe at certain times we've experienced complete surrendering and felt that. So it's something that we're going to talk about today. So does anybody want to start us off, kick us off with something they'd like to talk about in relation to that? Natalie, you want to go? This was Natalie's idea to this topic.
The topic came from was you, John. You recommended the Sedona Method, and I did it briefly the other night, and it was, you probably could explain better than me, John, about the Sedona Method, but yeah, that's why I came up with the subject, because it helps, especially at this time, you know, because where we're not knowing what's going to happen next or what the future may hold, if you can find yourself almost like pushing against it, you know, trying to push. But with the Sedona Method, please explain to us, John, about the Sedona Method.
Okay, so the Sedona Method is a technique for letting go. In a nutshell, that's what it is. It's a process that you can do either with a facilitator, where they'll guide you through it, or you can also do it on your own. There's a book that's available, you can get it on Amazon, called the Sedona Method. In that book, it will teach you how to do it. It's really simple. It's almost so simple that you think it's ridiculous. Like I looked into it a few years ago, and I did it briefly and just thought, it's just a load of rubbish. But when you do it with someone who knows what they're doing, then you start to actually experience the letting go. And to just put it in a way that you might understand is, with, say I've got this object and I'm holding on to it. If I was to hold on to this object and hold on to it all day, by the end of the day, I wouldn't even know that I'm holding on. I've just got used to this feeling of holding on. And it's only when you let go that you realize how tightly you're holding on to something. And we all do this with our feelings. We hold on, and this blocks them just naturally moving through. So feelings want to be felt, they come up, they should be felt, and then they can be released. When we resist the resistance, this holding on, it creates almost like a cocoon around the feeling, and it keeps it stuck. And as I think as children naturally are able to let go, and then as we grow up, we get conditioned into holding on. And the Sedona Method is just a process of pointing to the fact that you can let go. And it's not something that you can do consciously. You can't try to let go. It's something that will just happen once your mind and body see that it can let go. It will just happen. So this process is just a series of sort of questions that you ask yourself, and you just keep repeating the questions and going around and around. And through these questions, you're able to let go. But then as you start to let go, then you notice other feelings come up, more resistance comes up, and it's layers and layers and layers of this resistance and feelings. And with the Sedona Method, you can work through each layer and remove this block, this hanging on. And during the process, you'll get stuck at a certain point where you're stuck in this resistance. But then you can actually look at the resistance to the resistance, and it's just accepting that you're resisting right now, and just be aware that you are resisting. It's totally fine. There's nothing wrong with that. And it's almost like a fractal. That's the way I see it. It's like loops within loops within loops. And wherever you go, there's always another layer you can go to, where you realize that, okay, I'm stuck at the resistance, but I'm resisting the fact that I'm resisting. So I need to become okay with the resistance and just be like, let the resistance be there. Don't fight it. And then what you find is it releases. It's so simple, but I found it to be very, very powerful. And I've been working with someone who, we do it over Skype, and do long. I mean, I did one this morning. It was the 3-hour session of releasing, and yeah, it's great, and it's one technique of many for letting go. So that's Sedona Method.
I think it works lovely alongside Kambo as well, because when you have the physical purge and then you have the questions as well, because it kind of gets you to address yourself and what exactly it is you're releasing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, everybody, I think everybody can benefit from this. I don't think there's anybody out there who's not got some form of resistance. And it really, from reading some of the book, the guy that wrote this book, he's definitely awake. Like, you know, it's definitely a path to enlightenment. And a lot of teachers talk about, like, you know, Eckhart Tolle, about the power of now, and that just be in the present moment. And really that's what it is. It's just allowing whatever is coming up at that moment without resisting it. And when you can really drop the resistance, then everything will just flow. Feelings come up and they go, they come up, they go, they don't get stuck. And it's this constant resistance, which is really, that's what the separate self is. It's this constant argument with what's happening. It's like, I don't like this, I don't want this, I want something else. I don't want this, I want something else. Don't like this. So for me, when I was reading the book, I was like, okay, this guy, he's quote unquote woke. He knows what he's talking about in that respect. So it's a great tool. Anybody else like to comment? Maybe their own experience?
Oh, sorry.
I haven't tried the Sedona Method yet, but I found that a similar pattern actually happens to me, as Natalie was saying, when doing Kambo. Now you set it with intentions in my case. So like, if I know there is particularly something that I'm working on, it helps me physically to get probably to a similar result. So it's less of like a meditation or like inner questioning, or but it is as effective for sure. And then again, there was another, before knowing Kambo, I didn't have many other methods apart from meditation, and I found that maybe a similar use of a mind defeating tools is made by the Zen teachers. They use the koan. Sorry, yeah, it's called koan. There are certain sentences or like certain phrases that are paradoxical in themselves, and they are meant to defeat the rational. So the mind cannot wrap themselves around it, and that in a way that's a way to, it struggles with it until it cannot anymore, and it let go, and you can actually fall into a very deep, profound state of consciousness, of now, of knowing the moment, just by focusing on that. Probably mantras also have a similar kind of effect, because effectively what you're doing, you're basically creating a sound in your mind that evens out all the thoughts and allows you to let go of them. But I'm very curious to try the Sedona Method. I'm surely gonna look into that further. It seems like it's something you can actively do, or you know, insert in your routine to just dedicate a moment of your day to that. Even just refocusing on letting go, which is a very good purpose to have within a daily, you know, spiritual activities, I guess.
Yeah, go on, Helen. You were going to say something.
Yeah, I've noticed I was getting lots of sort of pains in my back, and I've got illnesses and things, but I've been working with someone. I want to do the Sedona Method, but realizing how much you hold on to tension in your body, and it's something that came up again, like in Kambo, when emotions come up, really checking in and figuring out where that is in your body. And I've stopped getting all the pains and aches that I used to. So we can, when you're talking about yoga meditation, really listening to the body. Like I was clenching my jaw, holding like my back up here and doing all of this. And it's something just on like a smaller level. If you check in during like a Kambo process, really focusing in and starting to do body movements in those places, I find like the process much easier. And when you figure out what's coming up for you, it just makes everything smoother. So yeah, it's just this thing that I found amazing recently, is that we can relax all these things in our body, and it's not actually pain. It can be emotions and energies and other things that we can clear. Because as you know, after a Kambo process, you feel very clear, very light. So yeah, that's been interesting for me recently. I don't know how that fits in with the Sedona Method as well.
I think it's any kind of way of finding different ways of releasing. I wouldn't say, I mean, it's so many different ways that we need to constantly find that release which suits us, you know, at the time. It's forever changing.
Because a lot of it as well is that for most of these things, you can't change them anyway. So by resisting it, you're just creating a problem that isn't needed. But it's a habit. Resistance is a habit. And actually, obviously there are things that you can change, for sure, but there are most things that we worry about we can't change. And the worrying and the resistance and that kind of feeling of stuckness doesn't help you at all. It just keeps you stuck. And having experienced in one of the sessions complete non-resistance, that was when it really clicked for me, was where I experienced complete non-resistance. And yeah, it was just a wonderful feeling of lightness and euphoria and bliss. And I know that if you can master this technique, then you can live your life, well, not saying in bliss all the time, but if you're able to constantly let go, just constantly be letting go of resisting what's happening, then yeah, it's a way out of suffering, for sure.
So is part of it about acceptance? Because there's things like I've learned through coaching where you're trying to help people get through their goals or get to things, but a lot of the time it's accepting things that you can't change. So is it around that?
Yes, exactly, that's it. So even when resistance comes up during the process, then you need to just acknowledge that the resistance is there and then stop resisting the resistance. It gets a bit tricky, but that's also another thing, is where you'll be resisting something, but then you start resisting the fact that you're resisting. So you need to just accept that there's resistance and just be like, can you just be okay that you're resisting, and just resist as much as you want right now? And then you're like, yeah, okay, I can do that. And then when the next bit is like, could you let it go? And then you find actually, okay, I can just accept that there's resistance and I can stop pushing back against it. I can just allow the resistance to be there. And when you allow the resistance to be there, it goes away. It's so weird. It's like counterintuitive, but it really is pointing to the fact that you could let go. And when you do that and you stay with the process, it will just happen naturally. But it's not something that you can't try to let go. If you in the process and you're trying to make something happen, it won't work. Similar to going to sleep at night, you can't try to go to sleep. If you try and go to sleep, you just lay there going, right, go to sleep. But you know, if you've got to be up for something the next day, this is what I get. If I know I've got to be up early for something, that can make it hard to sleep, because then I'm worried that I'm not going to get to sleep in time, and I start trying to go to sleep, and that doesn't work. And it's also the same with meditation. You can't try to meditate. You can't sit there thinking, right, just don't think, force the thoughts away. It's not going to work. You need to just have a process that you follow. And every time you fall off, you just come back. And then naturally it releases. Naturally it starts to happen. And that's what it is. It's a pointing method.
I guess it ties into surrendering.
So the body has a natural ability to release itself. Sorry, Natalie, go on.
It ties into surrendering and even the trauma release exercising, you know. But definitely like surrendering, because in Kambo and other kind of plant medicines, it's that surrender that we have to kind of take into life daily.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's it. It's about surrendering, because ultimately there is nothing else. There's only what's happening. It's all just happening anyway. It's just appearing. But there's this stream of thought that's contradicting it all the time. That's saying that it doesn't like it, that it wants something else. And obviously there'll be feelings as well, but those feelings that can naturally just pass through. But it's this imaginary entity in your head that's claiming ownership to everything, that keeps it all stuck. And it feels really good to be stuck. Yeah, go on.
I have. It brings me to an interesting branch of research that I'm doing now on what is free will and what is the breadth of it. Like, really, what are you able to choose in your life? And effectively, if you boil it down, it is, if you want to put it from an ethical point of view, at least for what I managed to understand until now, is you can really choose what type of forces you want to drive you, because you don't have much more choice than that, really, because as you're saying, everything is actually just you're just witnessing it, so you can only choose how you want to, whether you want to accept it or not, so if you want to resist it or not. And that actually sets the stage for like evil or good behavior towards it. You know, you can reject something and oppose it and be divisive about it, or you can accept it and embrace it, no matter what it is, no matter how dramatic it may look, and somehow stay in line with the flow of events of life. And that I understood it. If you really boil it down, it's what free will is. The choice is only how you relate to what's coming in front of your cinema screen, if you want, your little dot of consciousness, so your vision, your individual experience. And so it could be a tool for you to realize that the Sedona method, or other methods like that we're discussing, could be a way for you to realize you have that power at hand. You don't need to react to it. You can actually choose to allow it, to surrender to it, and that way is like you're coordinating your sails with the direction of the wind, and everything can go really fast and really well in your life. I think it's a broader kind of that's the why. Why would you want to do this type of exercise, I guess?
Yeah, no, that's right. That's right. Because really, the only free will that you have is to accept what's happening or to not accept what's happening, to resist it or to not resist it, ultimately.
I'm just wondering, so how does the Sedona method compare with like taking something like Kambo? Because Kambo works more on the body, right? And stuck emotions and traumas and, tension in the body. And I'm guessing the Sedona method is more like, it kind of sounds more like cognitive behavioral therapy, like you're going.
Yeah, I with the Sedona method, it's, how can I put it? So what might happen with Kambo is it can bring up the feelings, and buried feelings can come to the surface to be felt. And and not necessarily just Kambo, any other medicine or technique, it can bring feelings up, and then the feelings come up, and then they need to be felt, and you can just sit in them and feel them. What the Sedona method is a technique for releasing them. Not to say that doing Kambo or these other things doesn't help to release, but the Sedona method will get your body and mind in a state where it's just accepting everything. So then when things come up, they don't stick. Everything just releases. So when you work with Kambo, it might bring up an unpleasant feeling during the Kambo process, and you know, and you go through it and you feel it, but then afterwards, after the Kambo, that feeling might come up, might still be there, and you can sit and you can feel it. And the Sedona method is just a technique for being able to accept what's happening and release it.
So it sounds like something that's quite complementary to something like Kambo, because when you use any of these medicines, it's obviously they bring things up, but it's the work afterwards that you have to keep on going. So it's like reprogramming how you think and your relationship with control afterwards. So it's something that people could probably use afterwards.
Yeah, I think it's a great integration tool for any work that you're doing, any kind of medicine work or whatever. The Sedona method is just a really good tool to have in your tool belt to be able to deal with a particular feeling, or you can even do it with thoughts as well. But when something comes up, you know that you've got this thing where it's a roadmap for acceptance. That's what it is, really. It's a sort of blueprint for being able to just allow and accept what's happening. And also I see it as like a learning tool, in that in the session I did today, I uncovered some truths about where certain behaviors and certain feelings are coming from, what's underneath them, what's the underlying feeling that's driving a certain negative behavior or feeling. And I learned some stuff today about where it's coming from. And just that awareness, having the awareness of like, oh, okay, right, that's why I do this. That's why I'm stuck in this thing, is because really what I'm doing, even though on the surface I'm doing this, underneath there's this issue or this feeling. And once you see that, then when you live your life and then this surface thing comes up, you're like, oh, hey, hang on a minute. Right, that's not really what it is. Really, it's the other thing. And just awareness can be enough sometimes.
Amazing.
Yeah, I was going to say, do you find that the awareness is enough to kind of change the pattern completely and like release it essentially, or do you still need to do some work on it afterwards? Because sometimes when you just become conscious of what you're doing and why you're doing it, it can there's almost like an emotional release from just that.
Exactly. There was an emotional release. It was like a feeling of like freedom, of like, oh, okay, I've been stuck in this straitjacket of this thing that I've been doing or feeling, not knowing where it's come from or what to do. And then actually there was something underneath it that was all along, that was the driving force of this problem. So what I need to do is stop focusing on how to fix this problem and just look at the thing underneath. And that's very liberating for sure. But I mean, this is not, this is new. I've only done a few sessions and I'm still reading the book. So I'm, relative newbie with this method. But,
yeah.
Having experienced the fully letting go from that moment, I was like, yeah, this is great. This is something I really need.
I have found when I was doing like getting into meditation probably around 2 years ago, a lot of that stuff started happening for me as well. I kind of like that Headspace video where they're talking about the conscious and the subconscious mind, and how there's underlying there's things in the subconscious underlying, and it kind of bubbles up to the surface through meditation and you become aware of it. And there was a lot of that happening at the time, and it does, like you say, it does feel liberating. And I mean, it's crazy as well how the conscious mind can cover a lot of that stuff up, because a lot of the behaviors, when there's something deeper underlying, are kind of designed to distract from getting to that core truth and getting into it. Yep. So stuff like eating, alcohol, distractions, internet, that kind of stuff.
I would actually define them as well as forms of resistance, to be honest. Even just the fact that they are taking your attention away from what may whatever may the cause be of that behavior or that or why you may feel like that. You just cover it up with other feelings, other type of rewards. In the era of dopamine rewards, there are so many sources of things that actually give you like a little boon for a moment, so you can just escape it. So I actually see it in a more I don't know why. I like to imagine how, as if there's a battle going on for our awareness, our individual awareness, which are most of the time not even conscious of, and it's and exactly the choice of resisting it or surrendering to it is where you actually fall, which side you fall into. So keeping your awareness on things and being conscious of it, just doing that, you're actually siding with the resolving type of force. Rather, if you distract yourself and you try and dose down your awareness in so many ways you can do that, you're actually bending to the side of where you're making it worse for yourself in a way. You're just delaying the moment of time where you have to face it, basically. But that generally causes a lot of issues as well. It propagates in your life as well. It just even for basic law of attraction, if you want.
Helen, you always talk about the stories, recognizing the stories that we tell ourselves.
So yeah,
Helen.
there's when you tell these stories, you have your life scripts and what you sort of tell yourself, and you have these repeating stories. So a lot of the time when I do Kambo, that's the kind of things that I bring up and challenge. So I suppose these kind of methods, you're challenging them and rewriting your own script, because we find patterns that are useful to live by. So if you say, I'm really shy, and that's protecting you from talking all the time or like bringing things up, that can protect you from certain situations. But if you challenge them and release those thoughts, and then you can actually learn a lot more about yourself, that actually it's a story that you've been telling yourself for a while. Is it useful to me anymore? And can I release that? So all these sort of medicines, all these sort of methods, these are things that you can do. And it's interesting what we tell ourselves all the time. We have this sort of inner dialogue that's always saying that maybe we shouldn't do this much or that kind of thing, or if I'm doing this I'm going to be upset, or this kind of thing, and we sort of hold ourselves in a safe space. So I suppose all these things challenge us to go outside of the box and learn more about ourselves, which can be a bit scary but is rewarding in the end.
Exactly.
I have a question. The concept of surrender, I would say that, like, I've learned it. Like, I can remember the first time going on a medicine retreat, and you know, one of the de facto phrases ahead of surrender was, you know, surrender to the medicine, and at the time I had no idea what that meant. So it meant absolutely nothing. I have no, what am I surrendering to? I've got no idea. And so of course, you know, over some years now, and of course we mentioned Kambo here as well. Now I understand what that means, you know, in that moment, to surrender to something rather than to fight it, rather than to allow the ego mind to get into play and start going like, oh my God, this is awful. Oh my God, and engage with that rather than just trying to be present and observe. You know, be the compassionate observer versus the resistant egoic mind. But I'm curious about the notion of surrender when there is a sense of conflict or boundary crossing. Because if I think about a lot of the spiritually inclined literature that I've read over the years, one thing that regularly comes up from from people that are, you know, far more spiritually proficient than I am, is about how we construct boundaries for ourselves in our lives as a way, first and foremost, to honor ourselves and then to honor other people. And I sometimes find myself caught between the notion of surrender. Okay, well, this is what's happening in this moment, so I surrender to it. Or if it's a crossing of my boundaries, do I not surrender to it because that someone's crossed my boundaries? So I'm going to, I'm now in an act of resistance because someone has crossed my boundaries. And I don't have it. I don't, as per usual, I don't have an answer to this. But I'm curious about what other people think about that. Because if I think about like friends, like, you know, you've got a friend, your friend meets, every time your friend comes to meet you, they're always late. And perhaps you honor yourself by being on time for everybody because somebody gifts you their time and you gift your time back. You know, and what do you speak on that boundary, or do you surrender to it because this is what is happening in this moment?
No, you can't. It's not an excuse just to let everything just go. Like, as in, if somebody, you know, crosses a boundary, then you need to speak up for sure. But yeah, it's not like, okay, I'm just in this Zen state where nothing matters and I let people walk all over me and what have you. You still have to go with your what's the right word, self-integrity and honesty, but then you wouldn't stress about the outcome. So
Okay.
you do it, you might tell this person, or what might come up is, actually, I've got a resistance about a confrontation. I know this is what they're doing is wrong, or I need to say something, but actually I'm worried about having a confrontation with them. And then that would be the thing that you need to work on. So you have to do what you need to do. You do what's right, you do what the right thing. And then the surrendering might be, as I said, suddenly you're like, oh God, I don't want to have a confrontation. So you need to surrender to that resisting of having a confrontation. Not with the Sedona method, but I've read this somewhere else. I can't think where it was, but it was along the same lines of, it might have even been one of Eckhart Tolle's books or something similar, where someone asked a question and just said, well, does that mean that you just, you know, like exactly the same question that James asked? And the author or the teacher, whoever it was, said, no, when someone crosses a boundary or there's something not right, you do need to speak up. But then, like I said, with this, I think it's being able to accept the things that come up around that activity that you're doing.
I would like to add, there's this way of saying to how to act in this specific type of example that you made is generally you would want to speak up, but not resent the person for whatever action. So you don't add any judgment to it. You speak up. You actually define that this actually is something that is not right. You can discern, but you don't want to judge, because a judgment in that case would be something spring from a hate point of view. So the right way would be to speak up without resentment. So you just, and that's actually how you correctly negotiate like a confrontation. You know, like when you want to handle a so-called crucial conversation, a conversation that involves a lot of potential emotional baggage as well attached to it. You really want to stay cool, collected, and not let any emotion actually sneak in and potentially bring it to a judgmental point of view or personal attacks and stuff like that. Actually, I had a lot of these type of conversation recently with many friends on all the you know, the craziness that is going on just outside the door and news and whatnot. And even just keeping, you know, like a lucid and very, you know, focused conversation where people exchange information and their point of view can be very tricky sometimes. And sometimes the reactions were not what I actually expected. But knowing this precisely how this is actually should never be part of the equation, the emotional, although you could expect it from somebody who's not aware of it. This is it's something that gives you a little bit more of a chance to get out of it with positive results, I think.
You touched on the word that I was thinking right there, Ali, discernment. It is about having discernment in certain situations, and in the way of what is good for you, what feels right for you within these boundaries. And when once you know these boundaries, there is no resistance because you know them. You've already made the discernment about the situation, and that's where you let go because you set the boundaries and you put action towards your boundaries.
Yeah, I mean, following on from that, I was going to say it was you take it on a case by case basis. Obviously, if like someone's crossed your boundaries, and like for me, one example that came to mind was timekeeping. Like I was meeting up with friends, and they'd be late, and sometimes, you know, I'd kind of be in a different situation where I wasn't really annoyed by it, and you can just kind of do something on your phone or do whatever you needed to do. But other times when I was annoyed, you have to speak up and say something, right? And it's about taking it on a case by case basis and trying to be understanding, but also like if you're emotionally affected by it in the moment, then you might as well speak up and say something. Otherwise, you're just kind of repressing how you feel.
I want
Then
to add, yeah, go on.
Well, I was just going. Then do you then, as say you ask, so say you place a boundary. I'm going to use an example, just because it works easier in my mind. A friend of mine, or whenever I see her, always on her mobile phone. Like, so I can spend the evening with her at her house, and she's completely addicted to her mobile phone. And I cannot tell you how many times we have had a conversation about mobile phone use. And so I model it by, like, I put my phone away, that's it. But it hasn't changed. And obviously that's something for her. That's not mine. And unless I take the phone out of her hand, there's nothing I can do about it. And I wonder at what point, like, it's a boundary for me because I'm like, I'm here, I want to spend time with this person and connect without a phone in between. At what point, though, is it an act then of surrender where I make peace with it and say, this isn't going to change. I have to just, I'm going to be at peace with the situation as it is.
Well, I think you probably lay down a situation by saying, you know, I'd like to spend time with you, but it kind of irritates me when you're on your mobile phone all the time, or it's kind of distraction from the situation. And then after that, you know, things don't really change. And I don't know, I guess you have to make a call on it, but accept it as it is, you know.
Yeah,
It depends how much it affects your life. Like if you think, again, it comes down to discernment. If that thing is really affecting your life and you're thinking that it's coming from, you know, a place that is you know, coming from a dark place, that's not necessarily good for you, then, you know, that's when you have to be clearer on the boundaries. But if it's something, for example, you know, it's her addiction on the phone, do you know what I mean? You can't change it. You could help her with it if she wants to, but really it's her own addiction. So again, it's acceptance.
I think you need to just like have the conversation, and then you need to yourself make a decision. Like what one option would be just to tell them, and if they don't comply, like if she just carries on with her phone, one decision would be, okay, then I just accept it. Another decision would be, well, then I'm not going to spend time with this person. And you could maybe even tell her that. So if we're going to spend an evening together, you've got to agree to put your phone away, because I put my phone away. Otherwise, you know, it's not an enjoyable experience for me.
I realize that many times you tend to cling to people who were friends or that you consider friends in if you want to say it, a previous version of yourself, or when they were different themselves. And as you change and you evolve, and as everybody does, you know, you learn things, so you grow. some people actually don't fit in anymore with your way of being, especially if you're doing some inner work, some shadow work, and you're actually improving yourself and trying to really dig into and try and let every kind of resistance emerge and go against it. You are going to start having like more awareness, and other people may not be doing that work and may not realize what they're doing. So I see that going in two ways. Either these people actually you are an example for them in a way, and they actually something clicks, like maybe they see you becoming very healthy or very, very spot on, very acute, in your consideration, and then they somehow get inspired, so they actually push to reach, to learn from you, to reach the type of things you're doing, and maybe pick something up that could be useful for their life, or not, or maybe they would just grow apart, and it's a natural process. I don't think there's anything wrong with it, and it's not accepting it. It is a part of the surrounding. So that's my 2 cents on it.
There was someone that I worked with, Natalie, a medicine woman, and I remember her talking about when you have these type of conversations and these confrontations, that when it comes from a space of love, when you think about that, like conversations are very different as well. We tend to think of all the sort of aggressive sort of stuff that we want to get out and get a point across, but when it comes from a place of love, it's quite a different conversation. But I agree with what Ali's saying, where sometimes having these conversations is an opportunity for the other person to see something different and learn from, or they might not fit into your space and place on the journey that you are at the moment, and they can join you at other times. But it's about preserving your energy and seeing where the energy flows, where the energy goes. If you're spending too much energy, then you're going to be drained. And that's been a big learning for me. Yeah.
And I want to add one thing, if possible. There's I don't think that we should consider surrender and letting go as a passive kind of sort of acceptance of things only. It is as active as for example, meditation is a continuous focus on one thing. So you're not passively just in a way you are letting go and pushing back from trying to observe what's happening, but it constantly requires your focus, your attention. It's not like it's not a pure it's not a passive thing. It is an active kind of event, let's say. I think, and I mean, it is difficult to see how, probably, because surrender usually is when you actually just don't do nothing. But I think because you want to reach the moment where you are continuously, I mean, ideally, you would like to be in a moment where you accept everything that happens in life, open-hearted, and no matter if it may hurt you or not, if you may feel like some emotion come up or not, I think to stay in that place, it requires that focus. It requires that commitment. And that commitment requires energy and an action. It is not a passive surrender at all, actually. Yeah.
In Jamaica, we say no problem. That's our surrender. No problem. There's never any problem with nothing.
Yeah.
But I guess that comes to with when you realize that everyone else, when you look at it, what I got from the Sedona Method is just reminding ourselves to step out of our body and look at ourselves as the outsider looking in. When we're looking at ourselves as the outsider looking in, we realize, saying if we have a conflict with somebody else, that they have their own conflicts within their mind. And I always bring it back to that compassion. We don't know what's going on through someone else's mind, and that kind of controlling and pushing is like, it's just like two balls. When you just let go, that everything that's supposed to come to you will come to you. And yeah, regardless if you deem it as good or bad, you just see it as it's supposed to come. That's it. Simple.
Yeah, and I think what Helen said, so about just coming from a place of love. That whenever you're going to have a confrontation or say something, then come from a place of love, not from I'm angry or I'm annoyed because this is what they're doing and they shouldn't do. Like, for example, the phone example. How could she do that? How dare she do that? I'm spending my time. You know, if you come from that place, but if you just come from a place of compassion and understanding that it is an addiction, and we've all experienced that. The phones are incredibly addictive. And then to come from a calm place of love, and also that you know that it's actually hurting her. It's not the fact that it's hurting you and that it annoys you, that actually it's detrimental to her life, the fact that she's addicted to her phone.
Good point.
Yeah. And the same with the lateness thing as well, is that it's not just hurting, it's not just annoying me, but it's affecting this person's life in other ways because it will. So sort of like looking at it from a more macro level and seeing, doing things for the greater good of everybody, including yourself. So like, you know, I need to have my own self-honesty and self-respect and not let this person do whatever it is that they're doing, but also see that it affects me, but it affects everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Easier said than done. It's definitely easier said than done.
Everything's a practice. Absolutely.
Well, do you know what this reminds me of? And I haven't thought about this for such a long time. An ex partner of mine, he had this thing where he wanted me to surrender to him in bed, like completely surrender. And I was very resistant to this idea of surrender. And he would use this word surrender. He wanted me to surrender. It was like to give myself completely up. And I was very resistant to the idea of that. And I think and now I look back on it in retrospect, this sensibility of being kind of overwhelmed, taken over by something else. And I was like, no, it's not going to happen. But if I compare it to the experience of like a plant medicine, of allowing something else to take you over, and actually seeing what the experience is that lies on the other side of that taking over. And I did eventually do it. And what I realized was that actually once I'd surrendered, the thing on the other, I mean, in this particular case, we're talking about, you know, desire and pleasure, but on the other side of that was a different level, another expansion, but my resistance to it was a kind of mind resistance. So like, I'm not allowing another person to take me over, for want of a better word.
Comes with trust as well, because you know that resistance comes with the lack of trust.
For sure.
It's funny you say that though. I can't remember a technique. I saw a technique the other day and they were talking about just that, and they were using bondage on their partners, specifically to surrender to that technique, and to trust their partners using bondage and completely surrender to them. To build trust within relationships.
Link in the bio below.
I can't remember the method. I have to go back. It was like an ancient method that they use bondage for relationship building, trust, and surrendering.
We'll add that to the description for the podcast to make it more appealing to viewers.
Also, with that surrendering, in that particular context, would come vulnerability. And that's difficult for a lot of people.
Say that again, John. Comes
a vulnerability.
Vulnerability. But yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That is scary.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it becomes completely exposing. But actually, the other side of exposing is a real riches. But to be so exposed is to feel so vulnerable, is to go, okay, I'm going to push back against this. Yeah, completely. So
So that would be, yeah, so when next time it happens, just do, in that situation, just do the Sedona method. You could. I mean, that's an extreme example, but theoretically you could, in your head, you could do it in that moment. You could let go of, you could run the little process and and then uncover the resistance and then accept it and then let it go.
Surrender.
Interesting.
I think this links very well to the concept of feeling security, which is a bit of an illusion if you want.
Safety, yeah.
Every other second something could happen completely outside of your, of what you know, what you can see, that can just wipe you out without you even knowing it. So it always is just a perception and an illusion, if you want. So and that is precisely the reason why it is so important to be able to surrender to everything that comes in your life, because you don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing. You don't know what lessons you're going to be learning from it and what type of resistance is going to pop up. This is precisely why when somebody understands what profoundly what surrender means, and I can't say I'm there yet, but I research, and you really see fear, anger, and other emotions that are usually labeled as bad, even depression, as opportunities for new stuff to be dealt with, because they are like a new target that you can actually take up and embrace and release. So yeah, it is in a way interesting.
Let it go, let it flow.
Because the state of non-resistance is our natural state. A newborn baby, a baby is non-resistance. It just doesn't resist anything. It just cries when it's hungry. It shits when it wants to shit. It sleeps when it wants to sleep. It doesn't have a story or anything like that. And then it's only as we grow up that these layers and layers of resistance start to build. So it is our natural state. And it did feel very natural. When I reached a place of non-resistance, it was like a state of deep meditation. And for any of you that have reached a state of deep meditation, it does feel very natural. It feels like, oh, I've come home. This is me now. This is me in my natural state. And then being out of that state and being stressed is unnatural, but most of us live in that unnatural state and we get used to it. And we've talked about this before. It comes down to technology, overstimulation. If we all lived in nature, if we just didn't have technology and we lived like indigenous tribes people, lived in huts in the jungle and what have you, and we lived off the earth, we'd be much happier, I think. I can't say 100% because I haven't experienced that, but having done a Vipassana, yeah, you start to just be happy for no reason. You
just don't remember it, John. You just don't remember it was a previous life for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. But that's how we are. There's a good quote. Rupert Spira, who's a sort of non-duality teacher, speaker. You can check him out on YouTube. He's written books. He said that we feel like what we are is a separate self, and meditation is something that we do, is like an action. But actually, meditation is what we are, and the separate self is something that we do.
Have you experienced that through meditation, that state that you just described? So, yeah. I've
experienced. I've made a video on it actually a while ago. I made a video about it for it's on the Planet Kambo YouTube channel, where I talk about what happens when you meditate and my experience of what it feels like and what happens. And I made a video the day before yesterday where I said that I've got right back into my groove with meditation. I've been doing it 3, sometimes 4 times a day since we've gone into lockdown, and it clicked for the first time in a long time. I got to that place of just of peace, where the deep sleep that's in the background of our experience all the time, that came into the foreground. All the objects that my mind is grasping at all the time, that went into the background, and it was just this wonderful feeling of peace and like a deep sleep feeling. And I hadn't had that for a long time, for years, properly to feel that. And it only comes when I'm meditating regularly. And that, for me, that's 3 times a day. Because the longer I go in between sits, the harder it is to get to that state. Especially when I'm on the computer. The computer really takes me out of it. And something else that I've done, and I'm gonna make a video about this. So I don't go on social media. YouTube was one for me. I'd just go on YouTube and just like, you know, and see what videos have been suggested for you. It's the same thing. It's just like Facebook. But another thing is WhatsApp. So what I've done now is, because every time you get beeped or you see a message and you get that dopamine spike, it's the same thing. And I go in and I'm looking at the messages. So what I've done now is I've actually turned the WhatsApp notifications off, and I check it maybe whatever 3-4 times a day. I go in and I check, but I don't get beeped. So if somebody wants to phone me, they can. I can still take phone calls. Or if someone wants to contact me urgently, they can. But I'm not letting my phone use me, which is what I was doing. Which is every time I get a message, it sends me into that state.
Yeah.
And that helps a lot, because when I got into that meditative state that evening, the next day, I wasn't looking at any social media, but WhatsApp took me out of it, and it annoyed me. It really annoyed me that you know. And I was like, right. And I looked into how I can sort that out, and you know, you can turn the notifications off to the point where you don't even get the little icon at the top of the screen. So even if I look at my phone for something else, I don't know that I've got a message, because that would always make me need to look. I'd have to look at what the message is. So I think that's, I mean, maybe not everybody gets that, but I know for me that something I've realized is WhatsApp is just as bad as social media.
Yeah, no, I agree. I have the same issue with it, especially when you have it on your desktop as well. And you're,
Again, there's something else. And now what I do is I make 2 windows. I've got my main internet window that I'm using for work. And instead of having WhatsApp sitting there showing me that I've got messages, I've got another window that's emails and WhatsApp. And I don't look, that one I can't see. And I choose when I go in to see that. So maybe, you know, 3 times a day, 4 times a day, I go in and I check, go through the messages, answer the emails, and then I get rid of it. And then I'm not. And do you know what? When I did it, when I switched the WhatsApp off, the notifications, you know what I felt? Freedom. Honestly, freedom. That was the feeling. It was like, it's like liberation to not have that, the ball and chain of WhatsApp anymore.
I agree. I have to 100% agree. And honestly, it's been years that I actually took off completely on most of the day, like the notification sounds, but also the phone sounds. That, you know, when I'm working, of course, I need to check a bit more regularly, but outside of work, it's I decide when I'm available for calls and things like that. So, and it is 100% a very liberating feeling.
Yeah. I've recently muted the notifications on it as well. So because I found, especially with this lockdown situation, that you get sucked into it a lot more.
Yeah, but for me, because I'd muted the sound before, I had my phone on silent. But what I would get is whenever if I looked at my phone for something else, I could see the little icon telling me that I've got a message. And if I looked at that, I couldn't not look at the message. So it's like, right, I've got to get rid of that. I don't want to have that icon. I don't want to have any notifications from WhatsApp whatsoever. And I just Googled it, and you go into your settings on your phone, and you can turn all, you can actually customize it. You can choose which ones you get. But I just turn them all off. And now WhatsApp is this silent thing on my phone. It's not on my home screen. And only when I go into it will I see that I've got messages. And I'm like, that's how it's going to stay.
Yeah.
That's an amazing parallel to how you probably want to deal with thoughts.
Yeah.
I think I might be going down a similar path to you, John. Yeah.
it's the root. Honestly, I've just realised it's the root of unhappiness for me. When I'm in that meditative state, I'm completely different. Like Lucia noticed how different I was that evening, where we were just sitting and talking, and I wasn't. That the urge to keep jumping from one thing to another, to want to go and do something else, was gone. And then the next day, as I said, I wasn't using social media, but WhatsApp took me out of it, and I was like, that's got to go. Can't have that, because it's ruining my peace, and it makes me less productive, because it makes me I can't concentrate. Having constantly being like waiting for a message or needing to scroll or do those things, that for me, it's almost like ADHD. My attention span is just gone. Terrible. I even notice it when I'm reading. When I'm reading something, my mind jumps ahead because it gets bored with the line I'm reading and it wants to move on. And that's like, I'm sure people that have ADHD or ADD, whatever it is, I'm sure they have that as well. And I'm like, right, this has got to stop. And it's easily done. You just stop all that. Stop social media, stop WhatsApp notifications, and you're free. And it might be difficult to begin with. You'll be a bit antsy. You'll feel urges to want to check, but it will go away. It goes away pretty quick. And then you just pace. It's literally like cutting the ball and chain that you were attached to your phone.
Yep.
And as they say, you want to use your phone, don't have your phone use you.
Yeah, social media can be evil stuff. We've talked about it before, but you definitely get sucked into it, especially with the groups as well.
Yeah.
Totally, man. Totally, it's so bad. It's maybe one day they'll I don't know, not say outlaw it, but they'll do something to make it. There'll be some kind of regulations surrounding it, because kids get sucked into that at an early age. And most of us didn't have that. I know when I was growing up, we didn't have the internet, we didn't have mobile phones. But kids now, they grow up with that technology and they're plugged into it immediately. As soon as they're old enough, they have a phone, they have a smartphone, they have social media, and cannot be a good thing. Really cannot be a good thing for humanity, for the human race going forward.
Yeah, I wonder if it affects different generations differently, like the kids who are growing up with it now compared to our generation, because we were pretty much the first generation who kind of started using social media and the internet quite frequently. So I'm wondering if, whether it's destroying their attention spans more than it is us, or whether they're just kind of adapting to it better.
I think so completely. Actually, just yesterday I was reading a take of a very clever young kid of the I think she's around 15 or 16, who was posting a video on YouTube about this and saying, guys, if you have to do one thing for your kids, just don't give them an iPhone. Never. Let them grow without it, because let them do things like, I imagine, like, the type of games we're used to do. You just spend time outside playing football, just imagining things, learning about yourself and nature. I don't know, but not the phone. The phone is a complete drag of attention, and it does, especially when they're so young, like I don't know, below 10 years, like the mind gets all the elements of what they're seeing and somehow builds its structure based on what is actually looking at. So now I see like a lot of parents actually are giving the iPad to watch like really shitty cartoons to kids that are not even 3 years old, and they get addicted to it, and they get addicted to these type of videos, very fake, very plasticky, kind of with the exaggerated emotions and very glaring colors and stuff. It is. I see it like I every time I see it, I feel something is really wrong with that. Like that should not be a thing. And when I discuss this with some of my friends who have kids, and they have actually done that, and I tell them, did you try and take it off their hands? If you just did you try? And they told me yes, and usually it ends up in screams, tantrums, and pure anger, like as if you're really depriving this kid of a drug, like literally something. It is that bad. So yeah, the effect is very severe, and it should be really taken into account.
I mean, it's an addiction like anything else, right?
Yeah.
Same thing. It's a dopamine thing. So it's just as it's scrolling, and it is as addictive as, sugar, cocaine. It's all the same thing.
Yeah, it is for us. It surely is for very, very much. How you say, in minds that are still, just building up. We have less defense, especially if you consider that until I think the age of 5, kids are in a constant hypnosis state, basically, because they are just gathering information from the outside, and they're in constant delta state. So yeah, you can imagine the very, very heavy effect it's going to have on their minds. To the point where now, like some like younger generation, like the younger part of millennials, are having trouble, for example, with the addictions to video games and how much time they spend on like computers and things. And I was reading in Korea and in China and some Asian places where there's even a very bad education overall, maybe, and sometimes I have more complicated kind of upbringing. They have like recuperation camps for kids, to just do a digital detox, completely video game detox, so, and that's how bad it gets. That you don't have a life, you don't even eat, you just spend 14 hours on a PC. Yeah. Anyway, but it is true, and there's definitely, and the way out it is to just put control over it and understanding it, for sure.
Yeah, it's discipline. It's discipline. It's so easy to not have discipline with the phone, because it's like smoking cigarettes. It's another thing. It's so easy to just light up a cigarette, and it's really easy to just go on your phone. It's just something that's easy to do. Whereas, I don't know, an extreme example would be like using a Class A drug, like a heroin or something, and getting addicted to that. But that is a bigger deal. It's more of an event to do that than it is to just pick up your phone or to light up a cigarette. And I think that's one of the reasons why smoking was so addictive. Yes, they put chemicals in the cigarettes to make them more addictive, but it's so easy to just light up. You know what I mean? I can just do it now. I can do it every hour throughout my day, and I can still function in the world. But I can just do it. And it's the same with the phone. It's so easy to be undisciplined and just pick up your phone, because that urge is so strong. I know, because I've felt it. That urge to want to, when you're in it, when you've been doing it every day, then the urge is massive. Once you cut it off, it goes pretty quick. But that's the thing, is it's just, you've just got access to a very strong drug all the time that doesn't affect you so much that you can't function, similar to smoking. So we just do it, but it just requires a bit of discipline. That's all.
Yeah, it's very subtle as well, because you get addicted to it without realizing.
It's insidious. Yeah, that's right. It's very subtle. It just creeps in. Talking about discipline, there's a guy who is a ex, what do they call it, like special forces army guy in America, Jocko Willink.
Okay, yeah.
And Dave, who's if any of you listening to this don't know, David is the co-founder of Planet Kambo along with me, and he's really into Jocko Willink. And Jocko Willink is all about discipline. He's written a book called Discipline is Freedom, and he's all about taking extreme ownership and just having discipline. He's a really good guy to listen to. He's very motivational, the way that he speaks. And if you want to know about discipline, check him out. Like,
I've seen a couple of his videos. They're really good, and he's like someone who embodies it.
Absolutely, and he's so to the point, like straight, doesn't beat around the bush. He's like, if someone would say, how do I get up early in the morning? He'd be like, just get up early in the morning. You just do it. Just do it. Take ownership. Do it. You can't go around it. You just do it, and it'd be like that with anything. How do you do this? Just do it. Do it. Do it. Take action. Don't plan it. Don't like think about it. Don't draw up a manifesto of how you're going to do it. Just do it.
No, write all the good reasons why you should do it.
Yeah, that's exactly it. He's like, don't make lists about why, but just do it. Do it. Take action. Take action first. Don't worry about it. And maybe that'll be a good time. So I think we've been going for well over an hour. So maybe this would be a good point to wrap up.
Yeah.
Discipline.
Yeah. There you go.
Damn.
Got things to do.
Exactly.
Okay, guys.
Cool.
So yeah, great having you on the call, and it's been eventful, and we've talked about a lot of good different subjects. So yeah, thank you, everyone.
Till next time.
Till next time. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Wrong.